passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, everybody. Josh Brown here, and I am back from Podcast Movement 2014 in Texas, and we're going to do a little bit of a special episode here. Been having some problems with microphones, and actually Joe and I, a new co-host, had actually recorded an episode, but the sound quality just wasn't there, and we're still experiencing some technical issues. So for this particular week, I'm just gonna do a recap of Podcast Movement, talk about all the exciting things going on in podcasting and how people are able to leverage the podcast medium, or how it's an example of leveraging a digital medium to add revenue streams for a business. So we're going a little bit out of the norm here, but we're having to make do. I didn't want to have a day where we didn't have a release on Thursday, so we'll just go ahead and make do. So I went to Podcast Movement 2014 in Dallas, Texas. Not sure if you know what that is, but it is the first all podcast dedicated conference in the world. And it was really an international conference. There were people there mostly from the U.S., but outside of the U.S. as well. And it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And it was just an awesome time from start to finish. It was rocking and rolling, and had some incredible entrepreneurs, online entrepreneurs, speakers, podcasters. I mean, you name it. It was just such a great event. And one of the things I realized through this event was it was also the perfect size for a conference. I don't know if in your business you go to conferences, but sometimes when you go to a conference, if it's too big, it's just overwhelming. This was just the right size. It was somewhere around 400, maybe a little bit less. And so we were actually able to listen to some great keynote speakers and then talk to them afterwards and spend the weekend with them. To open up the show, Chris Brogan, who's an incredible entrepreneur, has written at least one New York Times bestselling book, possibly more, has a great book out called The Freaks Shall Inherit the Earth, which is an entrepreneurial book, believe it or not. And it's really, really cool. I mean, it's all about identifying that freak inside of you, or your own uniqueness, and bringing that to the forefront, and how those types of entrepreneurs are really the ones that are rising to the top. And it's really, really a great business book. There were other podcasters there. Jamie Tardy gave a great keynote speech. Cliff Ravenscraft, the podcast answer man, who really has been in podcasting since 2005. I mean, there was just a whole host of people there. And really, the sessions ran the gamut from really technical, practical stuff to more motivational stuff. John Lee Dumas was there from Entrepreneur on Fire. There were panels on the future of podcasting. I mean, really, really, really exciting stuff. Not sure if that's really of interest to you or not, but I'm really geeked up about it right now and amped up, and really thinking about how I can take this podcast to the next level. And that was, one of the things that was discussed frequently throughout this entire weekend was, when podcasting first came about back in 2004, 2005, it was really just a hobby. I mean, most of the people who were involved in it were doing it as a hobby and had no intentions of monetizing it, of turning it into a business, or in utilizing it to become part of their business. So that really stuck out to me as a central point, and sort of there were different points of views, to be sure. I mean, some of the old school podcasters look at all the new podcasters who are making a lot of money and figured out a way to monetize it, and I think they're somewhat frustrated by that, or don't like the fact that everybody just thinks of a podcast as a business as opposed to just being a regular hobby. I know for myself, I certainly think of this as something I love to do, but absolutely I'm trying to do it in a way that helps my business, and it is helping my business. And, we talked about the different ways in which you can do that. I mean, for myself, having a franchise legal practice, sure, having a podcast called Franchise Euphoria certainly helps me in that respect. I mean, it lends more credibility. For the audience to feel like they can know, like, and trust me. It really expands my network. I mean, I can't think of one thing that has expanded my network faster than having this podcast. I mean, I've been blogging for a few years now, but this podcast over the last 8-9 months, I've had people contact me from all over the country and outside of the country on numerous occasions. And really, it's forced me in many respects to think about and sometimes rethink where the nature of my legal practice is going, because one of the things with a law practice is that it's jurisdictional. So I'm licensed to practice law in Indiana, and unless I'm dealing with a federal matter, which oftentimes in franchising I am, then I can do stuff across the country. But if I'm dealing with a state issue and I'm not licensed to practice in that particular state, well, I'm really limited in what I can do from that perspective. So being that this podcast has allowed me to expand my network and continue to expand my network and is bringing a lot more opportunities my way, it's really opened up the gate to do consulting and much more consulting on a national basis, possibly doing some speaking and some other things that really I had not thought too much about before I launched the podcast. So it was just an incredible event. I mean, as with any kind of conference, I mean, I'm sure you've gone in whatever field you're in to conferences. I mean, the best ones really, they get you thinking, but they also challenge you, and there was also another theme running through the entire event on how people can utilize the podcast to really serve as an expression of who they are and of their passions and of their interests, and how we can tie those in to our businesses. And that really ties into one of the main points that I always try to make when I'm working with a person or an entrepreneur or, somebody who is looking to go from where they are to a better place. And maybe that's because they're in an environment, in a company that they feel like there's no more growth opportunities. Or maybe it's because they could be in a great environment, but maybe they've always had that bug inside of them that said they can launch at doing themselves. Or maybe it's somebody who just doesn't have any other options, but has a little bit of a nest egg and looking to get into business for themselves. No matter what situation you find yourself in, you always have to look in the mirror and take a self-assessment of what you like to do, what lights your fire, what are some of the passions and interests that you have. And you don't make a business decision purely based off of your passions and interests, but if you can figure out what those are and then align a skill set around it and then figure out how you can make money, man, I don't care if you buy a franchise, if you turn your business into a franchise or any kind of business endeavor, or you go work for another company. If you can align a passion with a skill set and a way to make money, that's what you should be doing. And so often when I meet with people, they've really never thought about that. I mean, I think we've been sort of conditioned. I heard an interesting interview with Michael Gerber the other night. He was interviewed on Michael O'Neill's Solopreneur podcast. It was a fascinating interview, and as you might know, I had a chance to interview Mr. Gerber as well, and it was just he's an interesting, fascinating, deep thinking, creative guy. And one of the things that he mentioned was, he said, I think we're all entrepreneurs when we're born, right? I mean, we're all born to create things. And at its very essence, that's what an entrepreneur is. You're a creator. You're creating things. But then what happens is we have all these different inputs throughout our life that can either push you further away from what you were supposed to do or guide you towards something that you're supposed to do. But at our core, we're all entrepreneurs, but that doesn't mean we're all going to run our own businesses. I mean, Chris Brogan, in his book, The Freak Shall Inherit the Earth, he talks about an employeepreneur, which I had never heard that term, but I love it, where it's somebody who works within the confines of a corporation, and yet they're building it as if it's their own business. They're operating as though they're running their own small business within the confines of a corporation. I mean, that's an employeepreneur, somebody who can really have an impact on where their career is going and doesn't feel like they're just stuck in the corporate wheel. So hopefully you can get a sense from this episode how jazzed up I am, how excited I am. And I think it all comes back to, the podcast is one thing. You may or may not be interested in starting your own podcast. And that was really only a small part of this conference. The real thing I took from it, and the real thing I take back to my day-to-day dealings, is that it's just been an incredible ride to basically launch into something like podcasting and see where it's taking me and other people along the way. I mean, there's all these unintended consequences from doing a podcast. I mean, as an example, I just got asked to speak at a Indianapolis Bar Association CLE to present on podcasting for lawyers. I mean, it's the first of its kind, and I may have an opportunity to do that in other states. I could have never dreamed about that, but it's all about not trying to figure out how everything is going to line up, but figure out just that next step. And so, how I can relate that possibly to help you through this episode is that if you are in that position where you are trying to just figure everything out and it's driving you nuts, because I've been there, stop doing that. Figure out what your next best step is, because you might not know what's going to happen 3 steps down the road. But if you're crystal clear on what your next step is, then you're going to put yourself in a position to possibly be reawakened to something that you never even thought was possible. So, I can take a breath now. Sorry if I was just going on and on there. But like I said, I'm super, super stoked coming back from this event. I'm learning ways in which I can make this podcast even better. Of course, I've got the new co-host, Joe, who will be coming on, and we're going to be looking at ways to even more professionalize the sound of it and maybe break it up into segments and do things to really help you, the listener, out even more. So if you've got any suggestions on things that we can do to make this podcast better, please share that. Email me at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. We're really kind of taking Franchise Euphoria. This is sort of the 1.0 version, and we're really kind of moving it towards the 2.0, where it's sort of its own entire entity in and of itself. And we've got our website, which is going to be launching here very shortly, and a whole entire Franchise Euphoria community that we are just super excited to build. I mean, I love nothing more than talking to people in whatever industry you're in who just are excited about the opportunities of the future and really want to try to figure out how they can take their businesses to the next level, how they can learn to operate their business in a franchise-like way so that they can be more systemized and process-oriented and therefore have more efficiencies and ultimately more profitability. So for Tuesday of next week, you can look forward to me and Joe being back on the horn. We're going to get all our technical issues worked out with the sound and microphones and all that good stuff. But hopefully you found some benefit from this episode. And until the next time, happy franchising.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, Nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.